How's everyone doing out there today? Welcome to Dojo Talk. Welcome to episode 11 of Dojo Talk. My name is Paula Bell, also known as the BA Martial Artist, and the purpose of Dojo Talk is to provide a training ground, the dojo, for business analysts to hear from experts and thought leaders in the industry. And today I am joined by a special guest. My special guest, many of you know, but you probably know him as Doc White. Dr. Michael White is the founder of the Business Analysis Doctor LLC, which is a global business analysis training provider. He has been a BA practitioner for over a decade. He has an extensive business analysis, project management, and coaching background. He has also driven innovation at some of the top financial institutions in the U.S. Michael also spearheaded an award-winning client service platform and holds a doctorate in business administration. He's a CBAP. He's AAC, CBDA, CPOA, and CSSGB. I don't know what all those stand for, but they sound really important. If you want to find out more about Michael, you can on LinkedIn. But can we go ahead and give a grand round of applause for Dr. Michael White? Okay, that applause was delayed. Sorry, very delayed. I'm having technical challenges over here today for some reason. I don't know what's going on, but I'm having technical challenges.
It was right on time. Thank you so much.
How you doing, Doc White?
I know, good. Right? It's always good when we get together. We always have so much fun together.
We do, and it doesn't seem like it's work, right? It's just how we roll. That's just what we do. That's so good. Hopefully you had a great weekend and everything is going well in your world.
It is, yes. It's starting to heat up here, so I'm just keeping cool inside and moving on.
I understand. Oh, we got Beverly Sudbury on with us today. Happy Monday. Greetings, Beverly.
Beverly. Hello.
Okay, so Michael. So today is a fun topic. This is a topic I like to talk about a lot. You and I have used it a lot. We've talked a lot about it, and it's all around the topic of mind mapping. I use it consistently in my business. I use it in my personal life. You use it as well. But for those who may be on the call who don't know what on earth we are talking about, can you explain a little bit about what mind mapping is and how it works?
Yeah, so mind mapping is typically described as a note-taking tool. So the whole premise behind it is it's supposed to allow you to capture concepts in a logical manner. And it's called a mind map because it is organized in the way that your brain or your mind works by having a central idea and then breaking that idea down into subtopics or decomposing it, right? And then making associations between those items. So, for example, if you take a city like New York, everybody knows things about New York and they have associations like a lot of people or Statue of Liberty or, for culture, everybody knows it's really diverse and the cuisine there is like pizza, right? So those are different associations we have with New York. And so it's basically when you think of New York, you think of those things. So the mind map is supposed to work for when you jot down this topic, this main topic, you capture these items or you can draw them, whatever, to capture these associations. So you don't have to think of all of the words when someone's presenting information to you. We're trying to write all the words, right? And you can't memorize every single word. So the mind map is supposed to help you make those associations so that it's easier for us to memorize certain thing and quickly draw from that information whenever we need to retrieve it. So in a nutshell, it's a combination of a note-taking tool and a diagramming tool that creates something really powerful.
And how have you used them personally?
Oh my goodness. So I actually started exercising mind maps when I was studying for my CBAP exam. And so I used it first to break down the Babak guide. I broke the Babak down into, for those of you who are familiar, I broke the Babak down into different knowledge areas. Um, and then I broke all the knowledge areas down into different tasks. So that was like one mind map. And then I broke down that even further so that there was a mind map for each knowledge area. So I broke it down by knowledge area, task, and then all of the elements underneath. That was such a game changer because it just really helped me make those quick associations. And that's what you need on the exam because you have to recall a lot of stuff, right? And you can't remember every single word, but it's those keywords that really help me. So I really started exercising mind maps as a study tool. And so after that, I started using it, whenever I get introduced to a project, like a kickoff project, I might use it to help get like project context really quickly to see what we're trying to do, who are the stakeholders, and things like that. Um, when I do stakeholder analysis, I might do it as well to try to determine who are all the stakeholders, the different categories of stakeholders. So, I've used it in a lot of different ways, um, especially since there are things that are technically mind maps that people don't really realize are mind maps, right? Like, some people call a fishbone diagram a type of mind map. Some people might call, a SWOT analysis a type of mind map, and people don't recognize it as that, but it kind of is when you think about what it's doing. So I've just used it in a number of ways. And even when I teach my courses, when I teach the CBAP and the core certification courses, I teach with the concepts in a mind map because I found it so powerful when I was studying that that's how I also present it to my students, right? So, I just use it in so many different ways in so many different areas of my life. I'm just like, I love them. I
I
really do.
I agree. I agree. If you're a visual person, the mind map is like a game changer because it's all about looking at something in a visual context that makes logical sense to you, that makes sense, that breaks it down in such a way to where you can understand. It's a great tool for breaking down real complex concepts into something a lot more simple so you
Yeah.
can get the bits and pieces of it. I try and tell people if you think of a org chart and how that's broken down, right? You have the main, whether it's the CEO or main department
Mhm.
head, and then you
Yeah.
have individuals underneath that person, individuals underneath that person. It's
Yeah.
that same sort of thing. It's just understanding the different levels in the organization. And I use it quite a bit in my personal life. I actually use a mind map to define my business strategy every year. It
Yes.
just makes it easier for me to understand the different components I'm going to focus on, what I'm going to focus on, and it gives me that clarity to understand where I'm going, and then I can create my goals off of that. These are the things that I have to do. These are my tasks that I need to do, things of that nature, and that's just what I use because I'm a very visual person too, and I like looking at that picture, that big picture.
Yeah. And that's another thing you mentioned with the org chart. That's actually called like a hierarchical mind map. And it's just like the more you learn about it, the more you realize that you're probably already using mind maps and don't even realize it. It's like, oh, wait, that's a mind map, or that could be a mind map. So, and also like tree diagrams, right? So there's so many different types, um, and different applications in, like you said, your business life, in your organizational life and things like that, or personal life as well. So, so many different applications for it.
So did you first? So I know you said you started to use mind maps when you were studying for the CBAP and breaking down the BABOK. Did you know about them prior to that? And if so, how did you first discover a mind map, or was that your first discovery?
Now, my first introduction to mind maps was the Babak guide. I was like, what is this? It was just one of the 50 techniques. And and I'll be frank, I don't think that Babak really gave the full breadth of what the technique is and what the way that they present it. And so I started doing my own independent research and probably YouTube or something like that. And I came across the founder, who was, what was his name? Tony Bunzen, or however you pronounce it, but he's a British psychologist, psychologist. I'm sorry,
Mm-hmm.
who popularized it, right? And he started, introducing me, not personally, but he discussed all of the different applications of it, and I was like, oh wow, now this is juicy, like this is good. And so that's when I started really getting into using it in the different ways outside of, just learning about it as a technique. um, but yeah, so babak was my introduction to the technique, but doing my own research, I understood that there's so many other applications of it that I was just like, oh, this is really, really interesting. And being an analyst, and people don't realize what analysis is taking a concept and then breaking those complex pieces down into more simple components. And that's really what you're doing with the mind map, right? So it just really aligns with how I think. I'm a very visual person. I also like structure, because I'm more likely to use a mind map with nodes versus drawing it freehand, well, unless I'm taking notes. But I really like the structure that I can create with mind maps. So yeah, that's basically my whole introduction to mind maps.
I don't even remember when I was introduced to mind maps, honestly. I've been using them for so long. I was probably using them before I even knew it was a mind map. I don't know. It's just an easy way for me to break things down. And though it sounds simple, there's still logic that goes behind how you create the mind map, though. So
Correct.
it might sound, oh, okay, I could just go make these pictures. But I found that individuals struggle with making mind maps because, number one, they may not know the right questions to ask or how
Yes.
to get down from that higher level to that lower
Right.
level.
Yeah.
So can you walk us through some of the basic steps you use to create your mind map, and then we can actually show what those components are after you talk. But I'm more thinking of the logic that you leverage to be able to start to create it, and then how do you know what to ask to know that you're getting down to that, breaking it down to those simpler concepts.
Um, well, I think a mind map is one of those things where, for me, it works best when you have a technique, an outside technique to facilitate it. So for me, I use five uh, W's and an H for so many different things, right? Like that to me, it's just something that I can apply in so many different ways. So that's a lot of the time I go to. So the first thing I say is, okay, this is my topic: who, what, where, when, why, right? I use that. That could be a topic around the central idea, right? Who, what, where, when, and why. And then I break each of those categories down. So, okay, if we're talking about our project, who are the stakeholders, right? So then we get into maybe the different departments, right? Or the different regions or locations or something like that, right? And that gets into the where, right? What are the different locations? So maybe we need to start talking about different states or countries or things like that, right? So I think using another decomposition tool, or like I said, five W's and an H is one of my go tos. You could also use five Y's as well. If you are really just trying to do like almost like a root cause analysis, that's another, like I said, a fishbone diagram. It's kind of like a mind map as well. But
Mm-hmm.
it really depends on what the central idea is, what the topic is, because the idea that you use, the technique that you use to formulate your questions to get to those topics and subtopics can really be dependent on what it is you're trying to investigate and what you're trying to get out of breaking it down, right?
Mm-hmm.
um, so yeah, I would definitely investigate um, different techniques, like elicitation techniques, to help you guide you
Mm-hmm.
through navigating through the mind map.
Mm-hmm. We do have a comment. It's from an audience participant who's very much in agreement. Very important tool for VAs to be more proactive and visual. And as a visual VA, it promotes clear concepts to map out your Poppet, your Six Sigma, encrypted with five W's and an H, all down to project products. So thank
Yeah.
you for that share. I agree. You have to know how to elicit And the interesting thing is too, you may not use the same elicitation tool for the mind maps that you're creating. You might use different tools that you might have to pull out to get to that level of granularity you need to get that
Yeah.
clarity and that focus. And that comes with experience and just
Yes.
um, experience and experimenting. I think sometimes you have to experiment to get to that level. So
Yeah.
let's jump in a little bit and let's talk about the components of a mind map. I'm gonna bring it to the stage real quick. So hopefully everyone can see this on their screens. You might have to go full screen, but I will warn everybody now: the slides that come up after this, they are going to get a lot more information, a lot smaller to read because there's a lot of information that you're pulling out. But um, Doc White, would you like to go through what the components are here, just so that everybody's on the same page? As we're first going to go through the components, and then we'll actually go through an example of a mind map that we collaborated on prior to this
Yeah.
pod.
Yeah, so of course you'll start with your central idea. So that's the main topic or the issue that you are investigating or working on. And for those of us that are business analysts or project managers, it might just simply be like the name of a project, right? Um, and so that will be your central idea. A lot of the times, what you'll see is that if applicable, you might just have it drawn as some type of image that might represent whatever your project or your central topic is. So, for example, if you're creating a restaurant, a pizza restaurant, you might just have a slice of pizza there, and then you break it down from there. And then we have your topics. So, your topics are the main, basically, they elaborate on the central idea, right? But those are like the main high level concepts that starts to categorize the key areas of the central idea. So you go from central idea to the topics, and then you go from your topics to your subtopics. So this again is further elaborating on those topics. So this represents the lowest level of detail, like the actual, like, I guess I would call them like line items. So this might be like actual names or maybe like a list or something of that nature, right? So this is that really more detailed information. And in between all of these thin little skinny lines that connect all of these are the branches. These are really, you could consider that like the glue that connects each of the nodes, all of the topic, subtopic, and central idea. It connects all of them. Sometimes what you might see is words might be like on top of each of those branches, but you don't need to have words on them. To sometimes those words will basically indicate what the association is between the larger node and the smaller node, or like the central idea to the main idea to the subtopic. I'm sorry, the central idea to the topic to the subtopic. There might be little notations, but that's not really needed. Um, and so those are the core components of that. Some of the things that I like to use or incorporate into my mind maps is images. Like I mentioned earlier, if it's something that is complex, I might just use an image to represent something. Another thing I like to do is incorporate color to categorize. So, for example, if I've got a central idea of, like I said earlier, a pizza restaurant, I might have a topic be location, right? And then within those locations, I might list out the different regions that I want to be in. So let's say I want to do the Midwest, I want to do the East Coast, and I want to do the West Coast, right? I'm not ready to do the South just yet, right? All I might have everything between that topic and subtopic in blue, just to very clearly illustrate that everything along this branch that's touching this branch is blue, and everything is connected here. These things are all associated with one another. So that's a quick way to see where a specific area fits within the larger picture, or you can easily pull out a certain area from all of this complex information that you might be having in your mind map.
100% agree. And in the context of this particular photo, one of the ways that I color coded was you have your central idea and then you have those topics coming off, and then all of your subtopics are different colors so that you could break down, okay, so these are the more granular things, and as they keep pushing out, more granular, more granular, more granular. The beauty about mind mapping is you make it your own, right?
Yeah.
It's what makes sense to you visually, and also what makes sense to your audience who's going to consume it, and you can explain it. For this particular example here, we don't have a key, but I might actually put a key on my mind map. So if I go back, I understand why I did what I did. You don't necessarily have to do that, but if you're doing a lot of different color coding or things of that nature that may not be as clear for someone who's looking at it at the first time, there's nothing wrong for adding that additional context or information so that somebody has a clear picture, because people do interpret pictures differently, right? Picture is worth 1,000 words. So people do interpret differently. So you want to make sure that what you are meaning for them to interpret is coming out that way.
Right. And you really raised a good point about whether it's going to be a mind map that's just for you and your own information, or if it's going to be a mind map that you're actually going to share and communicate with other people. So, for me, one thing I like to do is sometimes if I don't have the ability to just draw things out or really think about it, I might just take traditional notes and then I'll go back on my own time and organize it into a mind map, because that I have more time to really think through logically what these connections are. And so sometimes I feel like I can get more out of it when I do it that way, because if I'm trying to keep up with the pace of whoever I'm getting the information from, and maybe I'm asking questions, I need that additional time to go back and sit and really think about those logical connections, because that's how you can really internalize it, when you think through it and reorganize it and say, okay, no, this it's better here, things like that. So don't think that when you're doing a mind map, you always have to rush through it and try to keep up with whoever is giving you the information. Sometimes it's okay to take those notes and go back and then restructure it. Now, if you are presenting the mind map, some people use a mind map to facilitate brainstorming sessions. Then you have to be really clear about what the rules or the structures are. Like Paula said, you might need to have some type of key or rubric that says, like, okay, green is topics. A topic describes XYZ, a subtopic describes ABC, right? So that the team can really understand what's supposed to be in each of these areas. Also, what I like to do when I am presenting a mind map to other people is I will have the central idea, then I'll have the subtopics laid out what they are, and then I'll list out the questions on maybe like the whiteboard on what questions should each stakeholder ask themselves to provide me with the information that we need to be including as those topics or those subtopics, so they can start understanding how I need to think about this mind map, because we all need to be thinking about the mind map the same way. So don't just have your idea and not communicate it to the team. If you are presenting it to an audience, it needs to be understood, this is how we're using this mind map for this particular session or brainstorming session or whatever it is. Same thing goes with if you're doing a fishbone diagram of the sort. So definitely a key or a rubric really goes a long way with making sure that everybody's on the same page and that you're getting the most effective information out of everyone.
You bring up a good point too, because a lot of times when I do mind maps, I am usually in some sort of session with someone where they're just trying to brainstorm. They're just having their thoughts and I'm capturing, right? And then I go back and I make the mind map.
Mm-hmm.
And then I bring it back. And I'm like, so this is what I heard you say,
Yeah.
right? Is this really, because at the end of the day, the central idea is a problem they're trying to solve.
Right.
And so I'm like, so these are all the things that are coming off or contributing to this problem.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of the other outliers that contribute to those topics, right? Those subtopics. So it really depends on from what point you're doing the mind map as well. on how prepped you will be to ask certain questions
Yes.
as well. If you're starting with just brainstorming, you may not know those yet, but when you come back for that second round, like you said, this is iterative. When you come back for that second round, then things become a little bit more clear, and you're like, okay, so I need a little bit more context around this and these sort of things. So
Yes.
that's great advice. This is great advice.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for that.
So let's move on to an example. Let's put this all in practice, right? So we couldn't create it live for you all, and you probably wouldn't want us to, so we couldn't create it live. But here is an example of launching a new product. Now, the audience here, when Michael and I did this, we really were thinking that the audience here is business analysts, right? Or people who are in the project world. So a lot of times you are helping to launch a new product or implement a new technology, something of the sort. So we wanted to bring up some sort of concept that we felt would resonate with the work that you do. So our central idea here is that we're going to launch a new product. Now, this is going to be very generic because we're just a generic idea, right? It's just this is just to give you a little bit of a concept of what we're doing. So we're going to launch a new product. That's your central idea for right now. And as you consider launching this new product, this is to the point that Michael was bringing up. What are the components of launching that new product, right? You're going to have to do some sort of market research at some point. There's going to be some sort of product development that's going to happen. You need to definitely have a marketing strategy in order to market the product prior, when you launch it, and afterwards. There's probably going to have to be some financial planning there on what does this look like from a financial perspective? What's the return on investment? How much are we pushing out? That sort of thing. And then you also might have a sales strategy. Now, these are just 5 topics. That doesn't mean these are all of the topics, right? But from the lens we were looking at, these are some of the main components that you will need to work through to launch a new product.
Hmm.
And they're very generic and broad, right? So as you continue to go down further, and I would have loved to have done this step by, area by area, but I just felt that would have been too many slides. But let's just take, for example, market research. Now, let's take, for example, product development. I think that one would be the part that would really resonate with this audience, right? So you might have, from a subtopic, concept design. What is this new product going to look like? What's going to be the prototype? You're going to have to test it and get feedback and then probably determine the final design. Now, concept design, you could blow that out. This is where you're probably going to get requirements,
Yes.
business needs and features, all of those things, right? That's where you're going to go even deeper. But you don't, when you do a mind map, and Michael, this is why I would love for you to add your input too. When I do a mind map, I don't try and get into the weeds immediately. And I think that's where some people can struggle. I try to stay high level the whole way as I'm going so that I really do get to that granularity, sort of like root cause analysis, right? You start here and you got to keep going deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. And that's the same way I look at this. Yeah, it's broad, but don't jump all the way to product development. Let's just define requirements, right? There's probably more to it than that. And so
Yeah.
it's really keeping with that really broad perspective and just drilling down lower and lower and lower.
Yeah, and it can definitely shift as you move further along into the project. Like, towards the beginning of the project, it might look something like what you have, right? And then let's just say we are moving more towards a requirement phase or area, whatever you want to call it. I might drill down further into product development, and then that becomes my central idea. And then concept design, prototyping, those might become my topics, right? And then I'm elaborating further with more drilled down information in the form of subtopics, right? But those might be things like high level requirements and things like that. So the further along in the project you get into, and if you are starting to use the mind map to facilitate requirements, you can start taking those topics and then blow those up or expand those out to where the topics become the main idea or the central idea, and then you drill down further into those. And so And that's really, it's important to what you said, Paula, about, you can only really take it so far, because a mind mapping it's not a replacement, right, for requirements. It's a tool to capture the initial documentation, right? It's not, you can never really just use it to present requirements or user stories or anything like that, or a BRD or anything like that. It's just a really good way to capture the information and really to get everyone on the same page. And you can elicit certain things, but it's really a good way to say, okay, is this the high level information? Are these the main components? Just so that we can make sure that later we are taking all of these things into account when we further do our more detailed, requirement elicitation, or, technical elicitation, or things like that, right? So it's never supposed to be a replacement for actual stories or requirement or a backlog or anything like that.
100% agree. And something that you said made me think about something I went through today. So I was creating a process map today. And this process map, as I was creating it, I was adding more boxes because I was like, oh, there's another piece that I need to do.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was like, this needs to be a new process map. This just needs to be a process map on its own. It was just getting too complicated in that particular process that I had to move it into its own process, where I thought, oh, I was just adding a couple of boxes. But then when I started thinking about the logic through it, I was like, oh, no, this isn't a couple of boxes at all. There's a
Yeah.
lot of handoffs, a lot of things going on. It's the same sort of concept here. I like to think of a mind map as a roadmap or a blueprint. It's giving you that visual of the work you have to do. Right. So even if we blow this out further, like we do here, that's a lot of stuff on the screen. Right. But it's giving you the areas that you might want to focus on. If you keep with product development, prototyping, what's the prototype development look like? What does the
Yeah.
testing phases look like for that? Right. If you go over to market research, you might want to do a SWOT analysis. I highly recommend you do. Right. What are your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats? Those are the sort of things, but you have different deliverables that actually demonstrate the work that you're going to do in these areas, to your point. But this
Yeah.
is the beauty of just getting you organized. I like to think of mind mapping as a way to just get you organized
Yes.
and gain clarity on where you need to focus to get the
Yeah.
work done.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and that's another thing that's important too, is you kind of have to go in with the game plan when you are utilizing mind maps, right? Like, especially if you're doing it in a workshop with other people, you have to consider things like spacing if you're drawing it freehand, or if you're using a tool. It's kind of like, okay, can people see it if I go in too small, or if I um, go out, zoom out too far, can people see it? Is it still productive, right? So we have to think about all of these things, right? And then that's where it's kind of like, okay, we kind of have to have our kind of like limits about, okay, when is it time to drill down into any of these topics a little further and make it its own mind map, like Paula was saying earlier. So mind mapping, it theoretically it seems very simple, but there are certain rules that you do want to keep in mind, so that it is actually effective for both you and the audience that you might be communicating it to.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, we could have kept going and going and going and going with this mind map. I stopped here just to show you how spider webby this can get,
Yeah.
and whatnot, as a visual, right?
Yeah.
I literally think we could have stopped in the slide prior here and then started breaking down things, to your point, and coming up with new topic ideas, right? But
Yeah.
typically, if I'm going past this piece here, I think I've gone too far. I've done too much. Now, with my business, it's a little bit different, because with my business, that's strictly for me. And there's a way I'm looking at that makes sense for me. So again, it is to know your audience. But to your point, Michael, when you make things too complicated, even with a process map, people get lost in it, and then it does not serve its purpose, right? You have to keep that in mind too when you're doing mind mapping.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Awesome, awesome. So that was our example. I'm not seeing any questions in the chat, but we're going to keep talking about this. What do you think are some of the most common mistakes people make when they first start using mind maps, and how can they avoid them? I think we've talked about a couple of them already, but are there any others that you can think of that, you know, individuals should be aware of who want to start using this if they haven't been, or if they want to get better at it?
Yeah, I think it was almost to the point that I was just talking about earlier with, not going in with a game plan. You think it's a simple tool. I don't have to explain it. I can just draw it as I go. So one is if you are using mind mapping to facilitate some type of workshop with an audience, one pitfall could be not going in with a game plan and not understanding how you're going to use the mind map, so that you could have your triggers as to when something needs to get further elaborated into its own mind map. Um, you also need to be able to communicate what your rules are for the mind map to the audience, so that everybody can be thinking about it on the same page. Also, not considering spacing, right? So again, we know that they can blow out really big. Um, so you kind of have to balance, how far out do I want to go? How much whiteboard space do I want to go? How much white like screen do I have? Or if you're using a tool or whatever, to where you can expand out, but also you might need to be able to zoom in so that people can still see what the topics or subtopics even are, right? So you got to consider spacing and the ability to see, those the words that you're using. I will also say other pitfalls is not being like clear and concise enough with your keywords. One thing with mind maps is you really, a lot of the times, you want to just condense the labeling down to one or two words. Like, you don't want to have a whole sentence to represent a topic or a subtopic, right? It should be one or two words, ideally one word, but if you need to, two words as well. Um, just being really as clear and concise as possible, because you have to remember, the more words you try to include, the less you're going to be able to remember, right? So a mind map is supposed to be like bullet points, like things that are going to trigger your mind to remember or make an association with something else. It's not supposed to be this thing that you have to really just remember everything. It's supposed to be like a trigger, to say like, oh, okay, great. Okay, New York, lots of people, New York, Statue of Liberty, things like that. Not New York was founded in 19 whatever or 18 whatever, So just being, you want to be as clear and concise as possible, I'd say. Um, and I think also, I don't know if I would just call this a pitfall, but it's really more of a lack of awareness of, like I was saying earlier, of what is already a mind map. There's so many things that are not really labeled mind maps, but when you think about what it's doing, it actually is. And to be frank with you, until I was doing my own research, I didn't know a lot of this stuff. I was like, oh, like I didn't know initially that a fishbone diagram could be considered a mind map. I thought they were just two separate things. But then when I compared, the, like, I don't want to say the rules, but the components, and I was like, oh yeah, it's pretty much doing the same thing. It's just this one's a lot more specific about looking for a problem or a root cause, right? So yeah, it's just, like I said, you just want to be aware when you're using something about what it is and what it is not. So I just think, if you're using something, you just want to do a little bit of research about, it's, I mean, to me, I think research is fun, just about its origin and the different types and variations. And you know underutilizing mind maps, right? Because we can use, as business analysts, um, we could use it for requirements, we could use it for project planning, stakeholder analysis, we can initiate process mapping. Like I said, we could initiate a SWOT analysis. There's so many different ways that we can exercise or apply mind maps as an initial form of organizing our thoughts and information that we're coming across as we progress through a project. So
100% agree. 100% agree. And I would also say when you're doing your mind maps, don't get to a point where you feel like you have to know everything. You like to your point, you have to sit down and do it in one sitting. I have not ever done a mind map in one sitting.
yeah, yeah,
I've always come back with additional things that I needed to do. So don't feel any sort of way if that's the same with you.
yeah,
That's normal. That does happen.
yeah,
So
absolutely. And I was gonna say, yeah, and you can definitely make updates to it. Like
yeah,
if new information comes, you can make updates, or as you organize it, you might understand like the more I organize it, the more I'm realizing it didn't, the way that I have it now doesn't make the most sense. So let me structure it in a different way so that I can better communicate my ideas, or so that I can better make these associations with this information that I'm dealing with. So don't feel like, the first one has to be the final one, because it rarely ever is.
correct. Correct. So we do have a couple of questions going in, and this next question is actually a great segue into what I was going to ask you anyway. But we do have a question here from Shelly. Freehand, PowerPoint. What other tools have you used? She's used Miro and found it user friendly, pretty easy to use on the fly with an audience once you get the hang of it. So I will chime in here really quick. I actually use Lucidchart for all of my
Hmm.
mind mapping, and it's because I'm on a Mac. And so that's just the thing that I use. There's not Lucid Chart. I'm sorry, iThoughts. That's not what I meant. iThoughts is what I use on the Mac. There's something on Windows, I have it, but I can't remember what it is. I'm typically on my Mac when I'm doing mind mapping. So that's what I have religiously used. That's the whole purpose of the app, is to create mind maps, and it's just beautiful for me and easy to use and easy to export into different formats, whether you want it as a picture, a PDF file, or whatnot, and it's still readable when you export it. So that's the tool that I use and my tool of choice, just based on the platform I run on.
Yeah. And Shelly, it's interesting that you labeled freehand and PowerPoint, because that's exactly what my go-tos are. Because I like the freedom of really just being able to, do things on my own. But I have used what Paula actually had said earlier, accidentally, but I have used Lucid Chart as well. You can use Smart Draw. Anything, any diagramming tool, all the popular ones typically will have a mind map functionality if you look through like the templates. But yeah, so those are the ones that I would typically use. Lucid Chart would probably be like my go-to.
Perfect. We do have another question here. I'm not sure if I totally understand, but how can we use business analysis to achieve business strategic aims?
Um, Table, I might need you to ask that in a different way.
Hmm.
Um, how do we can we use business analysis to achieve? And
Are
yeah,
you
can
talking about strategic goals, or like how
yeah,
do we use it to achieve it? Yeah, if we can get a little bit more context on the specific question there, we can probably add a little bit more
yeah,
context and give a more appropriate and informed feedback on that question.
yeah. I can actually talk to what I think the question might be saying,
Okay.
because I think really that's the goal of what business analysis is, right? Is to enable an organization to meet a strategic goal, or as you call it, a strategic aim. So business analysis is really, first off, trying to identify the need of the business, right? What type of need it is, and then determining whether or not the organization is even capable of achieving that, or fulfilling or achieving that goal, right? So then we do our analysis piece to kind of understand what we need to do to start marching towards that goal. What changes need to happen, whether it's technology, whether it's process, whether it's the people. Um, Really just identifying the changes that need to happen to allow us to achieve those goals, and then documenting that and communicating that. So it's the question of how to use business analysis to achieve a business goal or a strategic business goal. It's like almost can't even be a question, because that's basically what business analysis is. it is helping the organization achieve a strategic business goal. So I think that's might be where you're going with the question, but if you can reword it, um, oh yeah, you said strategic goals. So yeah, that's it. Essentially we use our analysis skills to identify the problem, help define the problem, and determine the organization's capability to achieve the goals, and then identify what needs to happen to achieve those goals. There's a lot in between that, right? But that's essentially what business analysis is. Let me know. I don't know, Tabo, if that answers your question, but Paula, I don't know if you have anything you wanted to add to that.
No, you're right. It is. However, I've also seen where we are working on projects that we don't know what strategic goal it aligns to. And so you have to be really clear on what are the strategic goals and business objectives that
Yeah.
the organization wants to achieve, and how does the project you're working on align to those business objectives and goals. And I've seen projects where we can't clearly define that. That's a problem in itself. So we're trying to solve a problem and we don't even know if it's a real problem because we
Yeah.
can't align it to our overhead strategic goals. But I agree with everything you said. Business analysis, the whole purpose of us being business analysts is because we're solving problems to align to where the organization wants to go. And hopefully that is on their strategic goal roadmap or blueprint, one would hope.
Yes. Yeah, that's an excellent point, Paula. Because I have found that a lot of BAs are brought in mid project after the strategy analysis has taken place, right? So if you have ever been in that situation, what I typically would do is I would always try to look for the kickoff documentation or the project initiation documentation, like the business case, or if you're more of an agile environment, you want to look for like a vision statement or even like the product roadmap. So um, definitely, if you feel like you don't know what the strategic goal is, um, then you definitely want to look for the documentation or reach out to whoever, like your project manager or your agile coach, whoever might have access to that, um, so that you can say, okay, this is what they were initially asking. This is the problem, and so that's one of our initial responsibilities as a business analyst. We don't take what the stakeholders say at face value. We don't say, okay, this is the problem or this is the need. They identify a proposed need, and we really kind of define it and massage it, right? First of all, we determine, is this need a problem or is this need an opportunity? And then we determine, is this the correct problem? Is it the correct opportunity, right? And then that's where we kind of go backwards to see, okay, is the goal of this initiative aligned with the goals of the organization, the strategic goals of the organization, right? Because if a project doesn't align with the overall organizational goal, then it's probably a project that we don't that it's probably not a project that we need to be executing, right? So, and that's one of the things that take into consideration where when a business case is sent up to a steering committee or whoever, they look to see how this project or this initiative that you're requesting aligns with our overall organizational goals. And that's typically how projects get prioritized for approval, right? So, hopefully that helps answer your question.
Great insight. So looking ahead, we've got AI, we've got all these other things that our individuals are using. How do you see the future of mind mapping evolving with advancements in technology and education? Or do you just see it as still just being maybe this little hidden gem that I think not everybody has tapped into yet?
I can tell you how I would use AI when utilizing my maps. For me, I think I would probably use AI to help me think of the questions that I can ask
Mm-hmm.
when I'm creating my mind maps.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I could probably input, like, I'm creating this type of mind map for this issue or situation. What questions should I ask to formulate my topics and subtopics and things like that? So that's how I would use it. In the future, who knows? Maybe, it might even just be able to generate the mind map for us. But I think that's how I would start using AI to facilitate the mind mapping process for sure.
Yeah, I would have to agree. I still think you have to know what to ask AI to even get that out, right? You still have to know the right questions to ask based on
Yes.
the environment you're walking into and whatnot. And I think that's what can be challenging for some is
Mhm.
really knowing what to ask and how to drive the information they need in order to create that mind map. And that's why I just like to do discovery sessions. Just tell me everything you got, and then I'm going to come back and I'm going to organize it in a way and show it to you visually to start that conversation. It's very rare you're going to see me. I have done it live, but I haven't done it live in front of an audience. I'm doing it live on my computer as they're talking. I'm like, this is what I think I just heard you say as I'm
Yeah.
getting my thoughts together, right? But I'm not doing it live on screen necessarily.
Yeah.
I do that very rare. I
Yeah.
can, but I do it very rare. So it's just trying to figure out what is that central idea, and
Mhm.
then how I like to look at it is okay. What is the central idea and what's the desired outcome?
Yeah.
Right? Where are we going with this? So that directs me on. Now I need to know the path. Okay, so this is the central idea. This is the desired outcome. So how do we get there to that point, right? And you start to ask those sort of questions, and
Yeah.
not make it really complicated
Yeah.
at all.
Um, I agree with that. But I did want to make a point. One thing that you, since you brought up AI, one thing I always like to tell people, because, and this isn't a shameless plug, but our chapter is actually going to be talking about AI this Thursday. But one of the things that I always like to share about AI is it's really a tool for people with experience doing something, right? Like it's something that can just speed it up, not replace. And so I say that because when you understand where AI gets information from, it just gets information from the internet. It pulls in all these different things. And so for those of us with experience doing something, we can actually evaluate the outputs and see, is this good or not? Right. And my fear is that people without experience will try to use AI and produce something without having that being able to discern whether or not the information that AI is presenting is good. Right. That's where we start seeing bad information being presented to an audience and things like that. So, because I see it all the time, like I can tell when people have used AI but haven't really put more into it, right? So I think for those of us with the experience, we can say, okay, this is good, this isn't good, let's scrap this, but I want to elaborate on this part. And then you can further, like you said, when you know what questions to ask, you can create more intelligent outputs from the AI. So that's really how we should be using it versus saying, like, oh, create a mind map for project for creating a new product called, whatever, XYZ, right? It's just going to spit some stuff up together. But when you can ask it really detailed, specific, and intelligent questions, you can get more intelligent responses. And then that's what you can evaluate. But I will say, it can speed things up. I definitely use it to help speed things up for sure.
I definitely do. I use it for marketing, for social
Yeah,
copy.
absolutely.
When
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of something, but it's just not coming out. Okay, hey, I need your help. Help
It,
me. Tell me
yes.
how to say this better, because clearly it's not coming out the way I want to say it, right? So, but
Yeah.
again, it's only what you put in is what you're going to get out. So the more detail you have, it's a
Yeah.
great tool if you're a business analyst to actually help you learn how to ask questions better.
Yes, it's a powerful brainstorming
Mm-hmm.
tool for sure. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like I said, it's got its limitations,
Right.
but it can definitely help you kickstart certain activities for sure.
For sure. For
Yeah.
sure. Well, wow, Michael, we are coming to like 2 minutes up. We're about to be done here.
Yeah.
So, first of all, I want to say thank you to everyone who stayed with us and listened to us today. I hope this was beneficial and it makes more sense. Thank you, Michael, for sharing all of your knowledge and wisdom. Thank you to the
Absolutely.
BA Ninja Circle for turning in. For those who follow me, I always appreciate your support. Of course, you can subscribe to Dojo Talk on YouTube and Spotify. And if you definitely enjoyed this show, please help pass this video podcast along by leaving comments, ratings, the whole nine. And just keep that BA training going by leaving your comments. You might have something that comes up after we get offline and you're like, oh, I wish I would have asked this question while they were on the line. We still will be answering questions. So
Yeah.
feel free to still engage. But Michael, really quick, if people want to continue to engage with you, how can they do so?
I am on most social media platforms. You can go to my website, thebadoc.com. That's THEBADOC.com. Also on YouTube, the Business Analysis Doctor. Um, Facebook, LinkedIn, wherever I'm there. On LinkedIn, I am under Dr. Michael White, so feel free to connect with me. I will be happy to connect with everyone for sure.
Awesome, awesome. And if you want to connect with me, you can follow me. I am the same way. I am all over social media, always engaging. Michael and I follow each other. We engage on each other's
Yes.
posts and whatnot as well. So we do follow each other and engage in that way. And I'm quite sure I'll be bringing Doc White back for some more knowledge and some more wisdom on some topic that we haven't talked about yet, but
Yeah.
that will come up in our conversations as we talk. But go ahead and also please do follow. Again, keep this conversation going. But until next time, it's been a pleasure. The BA martial artist and Doc White are out.